In this video, we're going to be talking all about affiliations. Hey guys, Rich from Rich Big Gaming. Hope everyone is doing fantastically well. Welcome to this, a new MCP video and the first in a probably 4-part series. So a little mini series that I'm doing at the moment. And it's really going to be all around my methodology of when I'm looking to play a new affiliation. Now these videos are designed for new players, they're designed for older players who are maybe looking to get into more competitive games, or just somebody who enjoys these videos and likes to watch them all. There's a couple of you out there at the very least. But yeah, affiliations are obviously huge. When you pick up Marvel Crisis Protocol for the first ever time, obviously you've got, depending on the core box that you've picked up, you've got access to a couple of different affiliations leaders, but really you're either playing Avengers or Cabal, so that's where a lot of players start out. But for most people, they want to branch out very quickly. They want to start taking a look at something else, and that can be driven by a number of different things. Maybe you just want to play your absolute favorite characters from the comic books, from the TV shows and from the movies, or maybe you want to play a particular playstyle. Maybe you're more of a control player, maybe you're more of an attrition based player. So in this video, I'm going to break down a number of different things, all going through all different sorts of thought processes when I'm building my rosters, and in particular when I'm looking at my affiliations. But we're going to start out the video and just answer the question, first of all, of what is an affiliation? Because it can be a little bit of a difficult or a misleading term, for want of a better word, because especially for newer players, if you're coming into the game, sometimes you'll read a card, you won't quite understand. So I just want to spend the first few minutes of this video just outlining exactly what an affiliation is. So an affiliation, there's going to be 3 parts of it. So there's the affiliation themselves. So you can see here, we have got the Winter Guard. There is then leaders of that affiliation. Now, Winter Guard only have 1 leader, but there are up to 4, 5, 6, I think, in some cases, characters that can be leaders from different affiliations. That's always something that we have to bear in mind as well. And you can see here, you always know a card is a leader or a character is a leader because they will have this little symbol there. If I just use my cursor for the moment, this little symbol here, which shows that this particular superpower isn't actually a superpower, it's a leadership. It gives you the name, which is Unbreakable Red Line, and then it tells you which affiliation that is a leadership for. So these are always leadership. So these are only going to be usable in certain circumstances. You then have the rest of the crew. I'll leave a link down in the description below, but there's a full list of all affiliated characters and their given affiliations, or given affiliations and their affiliated characters on the AMG website. I will leave a link down in the description below. And this lists all of the characters and leaders, and once again you can see that we have this little symbol here, so we know that it is a leader for that particular affiliation. And then lastly, we have team tactics cards. Now, any team tactics card that has something written here like this, where it says Winter Guard, for example, can only be used if you are playing the Winter Guard affiliation. And you can see here, not only is it on the card itself, but it does say here, any Winter Guard character may spend up to 3 power to play this card. So we know that it needs to be a Winter Guard character that plays it. So even if I'm bringing in other characters, it can only ever be played by one of these characters on the list. So really, really important. And the reason I mention that is there are sometimes cards, and let's take Spirit of Wakanda for a change. So we can see a couple of things on Spirit of Wakanda. First of all, it is a Wakandan card. So you need to be playing the Wakanda affiliation to be able to use this card. And we can also see that it states a Wakanda character. So again, if we were to look at that list of Wakanda characters, the only characters on the board, irrespective of who else you've taken, that are going to be able to play it are going to be those that are listed under Wakanda. And unfortunately, in this game, we don't have that information on the cards themselves. It's something that I really like that they did in Shatterpoint, but it isn't in this game, unfortunately. But there is then this terminology on this card, which is all other allied characters within two then may gain the benefit from this card. And that's where a little bit of confusion comes in. And it's really that affiliated versus allied. So what are the differences? What comes into play where? So let's say we have got, we're going to take some Avengers. We're going to take some OG Avengers with Captain America, Steve Rogers from the original core box. And we've got 4 characters that we are bringing with us. We have got Doctor Strange, Luke Cage, Beast, and Toad. Now, Captain America has a leadership called A Day Unlike Any Other. It's a really nice leadership. It's fairly basic in terms of what it does, but this is going to let other characters be able to reduce the cost of their first superpower that they use by 1 to a minimum of 1. Now, let me go through this list and just explain to you who can use this, because not everybody in this roster or in this squad that I've built is actually affiliated to the Avengers or is part of the Avengers affiliation. So Luke Cage and Beast are affiliated. Okay, so they are on the Avengers list. Surprisingly for some people, Doctor Strange is not, and of course Toad isn't. But because this is a leadership, it means that even though these characters that are not affiliated, they can still use the leadership. Now, you need to remember that to have a leadership active, over 50%, so over 50% is quite specific, and a lot of people also get caught out with this one. So over 50% means if I've got 5 characters in my squad, 3 of them need to be affiliated. It means if I've got 6 characters in my squad, 4 of them need to be affiliated. So it's the majority of characters need to be affiliated. But even these 2 splash characters that we've brought, Doctor Strange and Toad, they're going to be able to benefit from Captain America's leadership because they are allied. They are not affiliated. So let's hopefully that makes sense. Let's take another example. We've got a tactics card from the Avengers. Avengers Assemble. Now, Cap's our leader. We've got Luke Cage and we've got Beast, so we know that 3 of our 5 are Avengers. So we know that we can use that Avengers leadership, and we know that we can then use Avengers specific cards. But this card states any number of allied Avengers characters may spend 1 power to play this card. Well, we know that Beast and Luke Cage are allied members. They're allied Avengers. Unfortunately, though, for Doctor Strange and Toad, they are not going to be able to use this card because they're not members of the Avengers. So whilst they are technically allied to an Avengers squad, they are not Avengers characters. So that's the sort of difference there between affiliated and then allied. So Toad and Doctor Strange are allied, Luke Cage and Beast are affiliated. And just a reminder, because it is really important, you need to have over 50% of your squad of a given affiliation to be able to use that affiliation. Also worth pointing out as well that if you're in a scenario where you have multiple leaderships available to you, you can only ever use 1 leadership at any one time. There is a tactics card that lets you do some funky stuff with it, but that's written on the tactics card. The rules is you can only use 1 leadership throughout the entire game, unless you've got something else that tells you you can do so. Okay, so now we know kind of some of the boundaries and some of the terminology and things like that. Let's talk about the next thing, because I mentioned there that a lot of people will first get into the game and they'll be getting into the game for a number of different reasons. They either like the play style of the game, the way that it plays out. They may just love Marvel. It may be a combination of both. But we do have affiliations in this game that are more difficult to play than others. And we do have, I would say, two distinct different play styles. It's rare that we would get a given affiliation that just does one thing and doesn't do any of the other thing. But they're going to be attrition and control. So what do we mean by attrition and what do I mean by control? So attrition is really going to be things like dice rolls, big characters who can deal a lot of damage. Terrain throws, for example, are a good form of attrition, or it could be defensive attrition. It could be characters that are very, very difficult to take down. But then you look at things like a defensive ability like bodyguard. Well, that goes into the control side of things. So, and even a character throw, very much attrition, very much aggressive, but you can also be throwing your opponent off a point, which means then it sort of bleeds into that control side as well. So what I wanted to do was just put up a quick graph, if you like, showing all of the different affiliations. Now, this is where I think they are placed. They are a general overview of the play style, but really attrition based is going to be more focused on either defensive tech or offensive tech to try and take your opponent down or outlast your opponent, whereas control is really going to be more about those extract plays. Generally, they're a little bit more advanced when it comes to the play style, not always, but generally. And this is really where positioning becomes very important. Being able to eyeball for ranges when you move or place a character. There's going to be a lot of steals in this sort of play style as well. So yeah, very, very different style of play. There are some affiliations that you can play pretty much without relying on rolling a dice, which can be really, really good. So let's take a look then at our first bunch, and I'm putting these into the sort of beginner friendly, easier to play affiliations. Now, I will say some of these affiliations have multiple leaders, and you'll find that not always, but generally the newer leaders are a little bit more advanced. But if you look, we've got Avengers. I would always say for any new player coming into the game, learning how to play Avengers is going to give you a really, really good overview of the game. It's going to teach you how superpowers work. You've got access to big hitters like the Hulk. You do have the ability to go down the aggressive side and dominate your opponent that way. You've also got a lot of defensive tech, but you can also do the control piece as well. So they're a very middle of the road affiliation, and they're very, very easy to pick up. As I mentioned, Steve's leadership, the sort of out of the box, or out of the original core box, should I say, leadership is reduce the cost of a superpower by 1, right? It's really simple, really easy and straightforward. If you want to lean more into the aggressive side, so on the attrition side, you've got affiliations like Guardians of the Galaxy, which I would also say are a fairly easy affiliation to play. Now, the difficulty of an affiliation doesn't always come from how easy their leadership is to use. It can come from the number of characters that they've got available to them. Guardians of the Galaxy have a huge number of characters available to them. They've got a couple of different, they cover a breadth of different threat levels as well. They've also got some of the quote-unquote best characters in affiliation. They've got access to really good tactics cards, and they've also got a 3-threat leader. Now, the threat of a leader is something we'll talk about in a little bit, but the lower the threat of a leader can also then open it up to mean that you can bring in other characters as well. On the very far end, and I would say the affiliation that is still not all the way over to one side of attrition is going to be Black Order. I also think these are a fairly beginner friendly affiliation to play. Yes, you've got to get a couple of reps in to work out your measurements and things like that, but their leadership, KO a character, gain a VP, right? It's probably the most attrition based leadership in the game. And then on the other side there, you've got Criminal Syndicate, which I would say of these are probably the most difficult to learn overall. I think, again, Kingpin is a great entry-level character to play. You've also then got Shadowlands Daredevil, who very much sits on the attrition side of things versus the control side of things. And then you've got, fan favourites like Wakanda, who, especially in the early days, they'd have been even further over on the control side. So I think all of these, so what have we got there? We've got Black Order, we've got X-Force, we've got Guardians of the Galaxy, we've got Cabal, we've got X-Men, we have got Avengers, we've got Criminal Syndicate, and we have Wakanda. Things they all have in common, they've got really nice, easy, simple, straightforward leaderships. They've got a very good large roster of characters to be able to choose from. A lot of them have recently had updates as well, so the character quality has been bumped up a little bit, but I think these are all very, very beginner friendly ones that you can pick up very, very easily indeed. On to the next tier then, if you like, so sort of the mid-level tier. You've got Hellfire Club, and they're right down the middle. Now, Hellfire Club are a strange one. They have a single character in their affiliation. It's Emma Frost. She brings a tactics card, and she can take whoever she wants, which really means that depending on the characters you bring, can really determine which side you want to go in. You could play these complete control, or you could choose to play them completely attrition based. We've then got, who else have we got in there? People like Spider Foes, who, you look at their leaderships, you look at their characters, leaning over to that side of attrition. Midnight Suns, they've got the Siege of Darkness card, which is really, really nice. And then you've got affiliations like Shield, who, Shield, Air Force, and Hydra, I think, are at the top end of this difficulty level. I would say, from a Shield perspective, it's almost an overabundance of things that you can choose from. They have access to so many characters, so many tactics cards. It can actually be quite difficult to work out which ones you want to play. Hydra are a little bit more complex in their leaderships, and their tactics cards again are also quite complex, and what they do, and again, quite a lot of them to choose from. So I did do a video actually. The last video I did on MCP was all around the different tactics cards, so definitely worth a watch. I'll put a link somewhere on the video for this one. And then, some fan favourites like Defenders, Brotherhood of Mutants in there as well. I see all of these as being a really good kind of next tier in terms of difficulty. And then lastly, we have got the ones that I think to really make work, you need to have a very, very good understanding of the game, excuse me, and how it works, and you really need to get your reps in with them. So these are going to be on the attrition side. This is going to be Weapon X, a very limited number of characters. You're going to probably be taking some splash. You need to be very careful with your character selection up against certain affiliations. Sentinels are really difficult purely because they only have 4 characters, 2 of which are the same character. They're the only affiliation in the game that can field 2 of the same models. So you really, and they're all quite high threat characters as well. So 4 threat is the minimum that they have in their affiliation, and they really want to be taking 2 5 threats, which can be quite difficult. Winter Guard, an affiliation that I absolutely love. A little bit better now, but again, an affiliation, you really need to understand their strengths and weaknesses to really be able to get the best out of them. Convocation are really a rule unto their own. They have no leader per se. They have a tactics card that is a leadership, and if played incorrectly, Convocation are very, very susceptible to just being cleared off the board, but played correctly and taken with the correct splash characters, taken with the right tactics card, they can be an absolutely formidable force, in the right hands. Dark Dimension, Dormammu is in exact same position as Emma in the Hellfire Club, in that it's a single character affiliation and you can bring whoever you want. The problem here is, whereas Emma's a 4 threat, Dormammu is a 6 threat, maybe even a 7 threat. 8 threat?
A few moments later.
Yeah, I had a mind blank there. He is an 8 threat character, which makes it very, very difficult to take others along there. Inhumans, another affiliation with a really high ceiling, but positioning and choosing when and who to distribute that power out to really needs some reps to get in there. And then the most control piece of all of them is going to be Web Warriors. Lots of pulls, lots of steals, but power management and positioning when you're using Web Warriors really takes a higher degree of skill, and also a real awareness of what your opponent can do and when they can do it, which kind of goes across the board for all of them. But generally in Web Warriors, you're fielding a team of 3 threats, maybe 4 threats at the most, under the Mao's leadership. So very, very susceptible to being taken out. So you really need to understand what your opponent is going to be doing and where they're going to be. So that's a breakdown, guys, of, as I say, it's an overarching view. Anybody could take a Web Warriors list and turn it into an attrition-based squad very, very easily. But these are general play styles and the things that you have access to within the affiliations themselves. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of, your play style and where you are in your MCP journey and career. And also, have you played any other games, right? If you've come from other games, Guild Ball or Malifaux, or maybe you've come from Star Wars Shatterpoint or something like that, other skirmish based games, you may find that actually jumping in at one of those higher levels is much, much easier. Or you may just say, do you know what, Rich, Sentinels are my absolute favorite characters, and I don't care that they're difficult to play, and I don't care that they are deemed to be not very good. They're the ones I want to play. And I say to you, sir, well done, because first and foremost, if you are not having fun, then what is the point in playing? This is not a job, it's a game. It should be enjoyed. And that would be really my recommendation to anyone, is this gives you an idea of what to expect, but pick your favourite affiliation and start with that, because that's a great place to start, and it's the one that you'll have the most fun with. Okay, so we've talked about attrition and control and the difficulty levels of each given affiliation. Now let's talk a little bit about the leaders and whether you should take one leader or maybe more. Now, as I mentioned, affiliations in this game can have one leader, they can have 2, 3, 4 leaders, or there may not be any designated leader for that affiliation, and you get a tactics card that lets you choose who is going to be your leader. So let's take Guardians of the Galaxy, for example. One of my loves. Yes, easy to play, but they're also very, very good, which I do like. And I do love me some Cosmic Guardians. Their only leader is Star-Lord, right? He is the only leader that they have got access to. He's got a great roster of characters. You can field, if you so wish, a Guardians of the Galaxy only affiliated roster, and nobody would look weirdly at you. Almost every character, I would argue every character in Guardians of the Galaxy is very, very viable. Also, some of them are very, very good indeed. So in this instance, we look at it and go, well, there's actually no real reason, right? I've got such a breadth of characters. I can go tall, I can go wide, terms we'll get onto in a moment, and I've got enough characters that do different things, aggressive characters, control pieces, that actually as a standalone affiliation they have everything that I need. So there's no need for me to take a different lead there, and the fact that there's only one doesn't matter. Let's take a look then at a different leadership, Criminal Syndicate, and 2 leaders in particular. I'm not going to put MODOK and I'm not going to put claw in here because it just then starts to confuse things. But let's take a look at these two leaders and why you maybe would want to think about bringing two different options for your leadership. So let's take a look first of all at the original leader of Criminal Syndicate, and that is going to be Kingpin, aka Wilson Fisk, and he brings the leadership illicit network. Now, this is all around the secure play. It's all around control. You can hand tokens off to each other. An asset or civilian token off to different characters. And when you're contesting an objective token, characters that are on the healthy side count as 2, meaning that if it's 1v1, you're going to break the tie, or your opponent needs to get 3 people on that point to be able to actually take the point from you. So you can imagine very, very control focused characters who don't want to be moved off points, characters who can get themselves back onto points, abilities that let you do all those sorts of things. So very, very much on the control side of play. But there are some setups and some matchups that really don't work for Wilson Fisk Kingpin, and sometimes it calls for something with a little bit more attrition based. And if we look at Shadowlands Daredevil, we've got Shadow War, where an allied character attacks. I mean, we already know this, right? That we already know this is attrition focused when an allied character attacks an enemy character holding or contesting an objective, it may reroll one of its attack die. This leadership ability can reroll failure results. Fails can never be rerolled unless you've got a card that specifies it. So here we've got an example of where I would say actually taking 2 leaders is, they're both the same threat level. They're both 4 threat, but they bring 2 very, very different gameplays. And it just means that depending on who you're coming up against, you've just got an extra option in there to be able to maximize your ability to win, especially in a tournament format where you maybe don't necessarily know what your opponent's going to be bringing. If it's a casual game and you're like, I just want to play me some Shadowlands Daredevil, then absolutely fine. But if you're building this for a tournament format, especially with fixed rosters where you can't change your roster, between games, this gives you a really, really nice rounded roster that can deal with multiple scenarios. Let's take a look at another affiliation, another reason why you may want to take 2 leaders. We've got the Brotherhood of Mutants, their current 2 leaders. We've got Magneto and we have got Mystique. Now, Magneto, very attrition focused in terms of what he does, but with a little bit of control. We've then got Freedom Force from Mystique. It's a little bit control-y, but you're still generally going to be playing a little bit more attrition based. But the characters that you take and things like that are not going to differ too much between these 2. Now, there are some situations where you look at it and go, well, this table does not have a lot of terrain on here. So actually, Magneto's leadership isn't going to really maximize what I want to do. So maybe Mystique is the best option. Or maybe you are on a pay to flip objective. So therefore, the second half of Mystique's leadership really isn't going to give you any other value. So there's some differences there. But for me, the real differences between these 2 leaderships, or between these 2 leaders, should I say, are when we take a look at the threat levels. 6 threat and 3 threat. Absolutely huge difference there. And it really, I told you I'd come back to it, it really lets you look at the difference between going tall and going wide. Now, what do we mean by tall and wide? Well, tall is you are taking very, very few characters who are generally bigger, beefier characters. Your 4, 5+ threat characters. You may have a couple of lower threats in there as well, but you're taking some big characters rather than going wide. I mentioned Web Warriors, for example. They're generally only running 2, 3, at the most 4 threat characters, meaning that they can typically go 5 or 6 wide versus 4, sometimes even only 3 wide, or tall, as we call it, with some other leaders as well. So yeah, again, another reason why you may want to take a second leader. But Rich, you may be saying to me, well, what about if I'm playing an affiliation, let's say like Winter Guard, and I've got Crimson Dynamo, and I've played enough games now to know that on certain matchups, these guys do not perform very, very well. They have very limited movement. And really one of the things that makes Winter Guard kind of cohesive is all around Crimson Dynamo. And it's his ability, Disruption Field, that lets you re-roll your opponent's attack dice. But it's only in a range 3 bubble. Now, typically, we're not too concerned about the map layouts of extracts because extracts are going to get moved around. But secures, for the most part, with the exception of one, are going to stay still. So I've played enough Winter Guard now. If I look at my opponent's cards and I see that they are running 3D maps, I know that I'm going to be in a huge amount of trouble. And if I'm just running pure Winter Guard with no second choice, it's going to be very, very difficult for me indeed. Now, that's not to say that you can't do that, and I have done this on many occasions, but you are already on the back foot because of the map layout, because these 3 are not going to change position. You need to be very, very spread out with your characters, meaning it's going to be much more difficult to get the maximum benefit from that disruption field, which brings me nicely onto dual affiliation. Now, what is dual affiliation, you ask? Well, this is quite simply where within a single squad, within a single roster, we take leaders and characters and tactics cards that allow us to play more than one affiliation within our given roster. Now, there are some very easy sort of picks out there when you look at dual affiliated rosters. Let's say X-Force and X-Men, for example. Every single character within X-Force, with the exception of Sabretooth, is actually affiliated to X-Men. So this makes taking both affiliations very, very easy, and it's something that you see people do quite a lot. It gives you a little bit more flexibility. There's very few tactics cards that you have to bring from the X-Force side of things. A lot of the tactics cards that they want to use, you're also going to be taking with X-Men as well. So they work really, really well together because of the number of characters. You could even go crazy as well. You could even throw a Hellfire Club in there because, to play Hellfire Club alongside them, you only need one character. Emma, she's already X-Men affiliated, and 1 tactics cards out of your 10. Heck, you could even go the whole hog and play Weapon X in there as well, but going 4 affiliated is a little bit difficult and not something that I would recommend. So sometimes the characters themselves just make perfect sense as to why you would want to play dual affiliation. But let's take a look at one of the first heavily used dual affiliation rosters in the game, and that's going to be Wakanda and Black Order. Now, if we go back to our attrition, control, and difficulty chart a second, you'll see that they are really at the polar opposites of what they do in the game, or at least they were back then. Wakanda can be a little, more attrition focused now with the new characters they've got, but way back when they very much weren't. Whereas Black Order were purely all about the attrition. So they had their 2 leaders, and then each affiliation only had access to. It's actually 4 each. I have forgot to put Storm on here. I always forget to put Storm. But you can already see in there that actually it's quite easy for them to take these characters as a single affiliation, or as a single roster, should I say. And there's a couple of reasons for this. First of all, you have got the attrition versus the control. What route do I want to go down? Now, who you're coming up against will factor into that. Are you playing a very, very big team? who actually have fewer characters to take out. So Thanos' leadership is, less impactful on the game. Or are you playing against a lot of different characters who have maybe got some control play, but with what Thanos can do, you can take them out very easily, meaning that you can win the game. You might not be winning on VPs, but you will catch up via attrition. Or in Black Panther's side, they've got lots of big characters. Maybe you're coming up against a tall roster, and the control that they have and indeed had is very, very good. Lots of pushes, some throws in there as well. So really, really good on that side. But so the other thing that really impacted them was the threat level. Black Order wanted to play at a very, very specific threat level. Even at 17, they'd often play, and still do to this day, play a threat down. But in the olden days, we've got 15 threat now, which makes it a lot more difficult for Black Order. But we also had 14 threat, which was crazy. But a 14 threat, Wakanda really came into their own. So there's a number of reasons why you may want to go dual affiliated. It can just be to cover all of your bases. It can give you a plan B, or it could just be to stop those gaps that or those matchups that that you are going to be very, very weak against. If you're interested, guys, let me know down in the comment section below if you'd like me to do a deeper dive on dual affiliation. My thoughts behind it, my process behind it. It's not something I do a lot. I tend to be a little bit more of a purist. I like to go with a single affiliation, but I have played them quite a lot. I have actually taken a quad threat into a game before, but it didn't work out very well over the duration of the event itself. But let me know in the comment section below if you would like me to do a deeper dive on dual affiliation. Okay then, let's talk about the rest of the team, because look, leaders are only one part of it. They're a big part of it, and the leaderships that you take and the leaders you take are going to determine how many characters you can bring along with you, the other characters that you need to bring, and the types of characters that you're going to bring as well. But it's really important that when we're building out the rest of the team, we can account for as well all situations if possible. We need a game plan at pretty much every threat level in the game. Now, why is threat level important? Well, when you're building out your rosters, you take 6 cards in total, 3 extracts, 3 secures, but you have no control. And we're going to talk here for the next couple of minutes about things that are outside of your control. You have no control over whether or not you're even going to get to choose which set of cards you're going to use, extracts or secures, because your opponent gets to do that if they win priority. Or you may not be able to choose the threat level that you are running at, again, depending on whether or not you get priority. And even if you do win and get to choose, there's no guarantee as to which of the 3 cards that you're going to be playing. So there's a lot of things that are outside of our control and are really left to chance at the beginning of the game. So because of that, we want to make sure that before we go into the game, we have a plan. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, there are 5 different threat levels in this game that we play. I'm not including the one-shot cards in here. I don't see them as being part of standard gameplay. But if you add one-shots in there, I think it goes up to 7 different threat levels, all the way from 14 up to 21. But we've got 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. And you will see all of these cards being played depending on the affiliation that somebody is playing. So you need to make sure that you have a plan in place. If you have a roster that is absolutely amazing at 19 or 20 threat, and you've got a plan for every single one of those scenarios, but your team is filled with 5, 6, 7 plus threat characters, you're going to struggle on a 15 threat setup, right? So you need to make sure you've got, before you go into a game, as you're building your roster, I always like to sit down and look and go, okay, 15 threat, what am I playing? What am I playing at 15 threat? And it's often nice to have a couple of options in there as well that you can swap in and out depending on what you're coming up against. The next thing that we cannot control, guys, is map layouts. There's 6 here, but there are 10 or so, I think, different map layouts that are going to be in the game. And again, just like because we don't know which crisis cards are going to be played, we don't know which maps are going to be played. Again, we can mitigate our bad maps. We can make sure that we take good maps for us, which is what you want to do, versus the bad maps. And then if we do win priority, we can take a look at our opponents, work out what is good on their side for us, what's not good, and then make a decision. Are we taking secures? Are we taking extracts? If we lose priority, then it kind of goes back to that Crimson Dynamo situation I mentioned where, we know on the D map he's not very good. So you just need to make sure, guys, that you've got your bases covered when it comes to the different map layouts and things like that. And that, again, you've got a plan in place for each of them. Okay, so let's talk about threat distribution. And what do I mean by that? Well, this is really the number of different characters at different threat levels that you want to be including in your roster. Now, this is not a hard, fast rule. I break this rule myself all of the time. But if you stick to this within 1 or 2 of each level, then you're going to be in a really, really good position. So let's take a look then. We've got our threat level along the bottom, and then we've got the number of characters. I don't know why my graph is doing them in 0.5s. But starting out, I always like to make sure I have got at least 1-2 threat in my roster. It can be the difference between me being able to take one of my bigger characters on a lower threat map versus having to take a 4 threat rather than my big hitting 6 threat or something like that. So I always like to have a 2 threat character in there because it really does just help with going up and down ever so slightly. Or even if you're best, you at 17 threat, you've got a really good cohesive unit that works really well together. If you then go to 19 and you don't have a 2 threat, it means you've got to swap multiple characters out potentially. Next up is going to be 3 threats. Now, again, this is just a guidance, but I like between 3 and 4 3 threats. Again, that are going to do different things and are going to come into play at different times. And again, it really, really helps with making sure I've got enough options based on the various different map layouts and threat levels that we have. 4 threat characters. Again, I like to take at least 2 or 3. I sometimes have 4 threats in there, especially if my lead is a 4 threat, and then I've got 1 or 2 very, very good in affiliation 4 threats that I want to bring, or if there's just a very good 4 threat splash that I want to bring as well. Again, typically with each of them bringing something a little bit more. Next up then is going to be 5 threat characters. So typically, 1 or 2 of these, I would say at the absolute most. Again, I break my own rules regularly, but I understand my own I understand my own roster. I know when I'm playing what, and if I've got a 5 threat in there, it's for a very, very specific reason. And then lastly is going to be your 6+ threat characters, so your big hitters. Generally nowadays, especially with Malekith not being too much of a thing and Cosmic Ghost Rider being less of a thing, you see this a little bit less, but it's often in the form of a Hulk or of a Thanos or something like that. But generally you don't want to be having more than 1. I would say at the maximum 2 of these, because again, it's going to make it much more difficult at the other end. So that's how I think the threat distribution should look. Again, this is not a min-max thing by any stretch of the imagination. Obviously, these are based on our 10 characters, and this is what I would recommend for somebody starting out. Obviously, if you've got more experience, you can build your rosters in your own way, but this is a really, really good starting point when it comes to threat distribution to make sure that you have the right number of characters on the right threat level of crisis card. Okay, let's talk next then about when to splash. And first of all, let's just remind ourselves of what a splash character is. I'll take you back to our earlier example. We've got our Avengers roster with our squad of 5. We've also got Captain America, Luke Cage and Beast who are forming that Avengers affiliation for us, and then we've brought Doctor Strange and Toad. We just refer to them in the game as splash characters. They're characters that are not part of the affiliation that you splash, if you like, into your roster. Now, there are many reasons why, and indeed why not, you would want to bring splash characters into your roster. Let's take a look at one of the reasons that may discourage you. So 2 cards here, Siege of Darkness from Midnight Suns. It lets everybody who's a Midnight Sun make an attack, a 0-cost attack, which is crazily good. And then First Class from the Uncanny X-Men. That means that each allied Uncanny X-Men character does not have to spend power the first time they interact with an objective token this round, which again for that round 1 power management can be very, very good indeed. So because they have these 2 affiliations and many others have cards that are very good, but require you to be a character of that given affiliation to be able to use. This can discourage you from taking splash characters, and I think that's absolutely fine. If I'm playing Midnight Suns, I want to make sure that when I play Siege of Darkness, I'm getting the maximum value from that card, and I get to make as many attacks as possible. If I'm playing X-Men, again, when I play this card, generally at the beginning of turn 1, because that's when it has the most impact, I want to make sure that as many characters as possible that I am fielding are going to be able to benefit from this card. So that makes absolute perfect sense. Now let's take a look at some reasons why you may want to take splash characters. Let's take Toad, for example. Toad is a great little 2-threat character. You see him splashed everywhere, and there is a number of reasons for that. First of all, guys, he is a 2-threat character. Not every affiliation in this game has access to a 2-threat character. He's also a great extract player. Because he can move up and he can interact within range 2, he's really useful to be able to go up and pick an objective up. And if you've managed to get an extra power onto him or something like that, or an extra couple of power, he can, make an action and do a finders keepers. Maybe he's made an attack, so he can move up, he can interact, and he can get out of dodge. But he gets out of dodge very well as well with his slippery. So Toad is a great extract play, and he can bring some of that control in an otherwise pure attrition focused list, balancing your list out ever so slightly. Again, another example of a character who just is everywhere at the moment is Bill, and that is Bill in combination with Eyes on the Prize. So this again brings an extract play that you may not have access to in your given affiliation. So Bill, because he generates 2 power, because he's on a medium base and because he's a medium move, it means that if he plays Eyes on the Prize, which essentially turns him into Toad for a turn, he can move up with a single medium move, pick up an objective on the middle line, and then is safe to then be able to move back, either just to get out of safety or to move on to a back point and be able to contest that. So you see Bill played a lot again to add in some of those extract plays, and he's just overall a very good character. Now there's also other reasons why you take splash characters. Let's take a look at Ulik, for example, a firm favourite character of mine, but he has access to a couple of things that if he can turn them on round 1, makes him very powerful indeed. So first of all, we have got Crushing Leap. It's going to cost 3. It's an action, but he gets to make a short advance, then placed within range 2, and then he can make an attack. So a huge amount of movement. But the problem is, he only generates 2 power at the start of the turn. He also has the tactics card Rock and Troll. He may spend 3 power to play this card. He drops everything that he's holding, but you can place him within range 5 of where he's sat. Again, this requires 2 power. Requires 3 power, like Crushing Leap, meaning that it becomes unusable unless somebody can feed power into it. Now, there's many ways that you can feed power into characters, but one of those characters is Black Bolt because of his leadership, King of the Inhumans, where during each of your turns, one allied character may spend 1 power at any time. If it does, choose an allied character within 3 of it. The chosen character then gains a power, so he can move power around, meaning you can move a power onto Ulik. You can give him the 3 power that he needs. He can then either do a Crushing Leap or a Rock Control turn 1, getting him right into the action, displacing characters, then generating enough power to potentially do another Crushing Leap, getting to your opponent's backline even, or maybe doing a Bad Manners or something like that. So other reasons why you may want to take splash characters is you look at the affiliation you want to play, you look at the leadership, and you go, ooh, who could really benefit from that? What very good character could I make exceptionally good by putting him under this particular leadership and doing these sorts of things with him? Now, Ron, been on the channel many times, good friend of mine, he put this to amazing use at the York weekend a year or so ago now, when actually just over a year ago, and won the whole thing with an Inhumans roster before Inhumans got all of their extra stuff, and at a time where people thought Ulik wasn't very good, he found that winning combination and went, this is going to be really powerful, and it worked for him really well. So there's many reasons why you may want to take splash characters. I would just say go out there and do some testing with them. Go and look at them. Try and find those hidden little things that people haven't yet seen, and you'll have a lot of fun doing it. But B, you may even find something that is becomes the meta, which is always a nice thing to do. And there we go, guys. That is going to be my breakdown of all things affiliations. The next video in this series is going to be taking a look at or doing a deeper dive into that crisis card selection. How do I choose what types of crisis that I want to take? Am I playing control? Am I playing attrition? What affiliation am I playing? So I'm going to do a deep dive on that, and then following up from that, we're going to take a look at tactics cards, the process that we go through. They're both going to be shorter videos, so they're probably not going to be almost an hour long like this one is. And then rounding it out, guys, and this is where I want some input from yourselves, rounding it out, I'm then going to be taking everything that I've spoke about during these 3 videos, and then in the final video we're going to be putting it into practice, and we're going to be building an affiliation, building a roster with a given affiliation. Who knows, maybe 2 affiliations, and that's where I want your input, guys. Let me know down in the comment section below which affiliation you would like me to focus on for that final video. What I'll then do is I'll pick 2 or 3 of them out, and then I'll put a poll up, and then everyone will be able to vote on which one they want to see. I've already got an idea of which of a few firm favourites that I think people will have, but the idea of these video, guys, is to really help you in that decision-making process when it comes to building out either your first or your 100th roster. Hopefully there's something in these videos that you hadn't realised, maybe you've learnt, or just some little helpful tidbits that you want to implement into your own game when it comes to building out your roster. Guys, I want to give a huge shout out to all of our Patreons. They really do help, and if you want to support us on Patreon, you can do so from as little as £1 a month. There'll be a link down in the description below, or you can become a YouTube member. Click that join button and you'll get access to lots of different perks that are on there. But guys, you don't need to do any of those things, just simply liking, commenting, making sure you hit that subscribe button and sharing the videos really goes a long way to supporting the channel. So don't ever feel like you have to go down those other route. None of my content is ever behind a paywall, but if you do want to support the channel, it is greatly appreciated. I want to give a big shout out to Leodis Games, the sponsor of the channel. Again, just like my Patreons, they make it that much easier to run the channel. We hold MCP events there, we hold Shatterpoint events there, plus a whole bunch of other things as well. I'm playing a Mordheim campaign at the moment, which I'm absolutely loving, and if you do want to check them out, there'll be a link down in the description below, and there's an offer there for £5 off your first order. And again, that goes a long way to helping support the channel. Guys, check out the Discord. It's where we put all of our announcements for all of our events. We've just kicked off our latest Shatterpoint event. In 2 weeks' time, we're going to be doing the next MCP event. So make sure you're on the Discord to go and check those out. And as always, guys, it leaves me with just enough time to say stay well, keep safe, and until next time, bye for now.